Welcome back to the Electrify podcast, brought to you by the creators of Electrify Expo, North America's largest EV festival, coming to a major city near you. Thank you so much for joining us here. Chris, you look cool, calm, casual. What's today? Wednesday. You look calm. I love the hair, by the way. First of all, you look like you look like a human that just creates. I don't know. I want to listen to what you have to say. So that's why you're here. But we're talking about Arcimoto, the FUV. I love the acronym. But Arcimoto is something I think that's really just such a unique vehicle, just in all these electric and mobility spaces. This is something that feeds into just that fun, but it's a multi-use vehicle as well. And we'll cut into that. But Arcimoto, what's your main intention with Arcimoto?
Really, the main intention is to provide the electric vehicle for everyone, like an electric vehicle that regular people can afford, that want to drive, that actually makes their lives better and solves problems versus causes them. Current electric vehicles average purchase price is 55,000, but average salary in the U.S. is 45. So we're asking people to do what's right for the planet and buy an electric vehicle and spend more than their yearly nut on mobility. Yeah. And if you look at, like, let's say that individual who makes 45,000 a year is able to actually get the loan for it. Their payments can be between $550 and $750, depending on their credit score, for that $55,000 vehicle. Well, that's their food budget. Yeah. So, don't worry about eating, but at least you did your part, right? And so this adoption through Catholicism or guilt that's fundamentally driven EVs to this point is reaching critical mass. And we're seeing that, right, as adoption is slowing. But if we look at what the customer experience is for an electric vehicle, right, I've got to spend more than I would normally for my transportation. I have to invest in my own infrastructure at my house to upgrade the charging to be able to support that vehicle, or I have to spend hours a day charging it somewhere else outside of my normal rotation. Most people don't have a couple extra hours to just hang out and charge their vehicle. And on top of that, it's a fairly new, it's only a decade old, really, like the true blue modern electric vehicle, right? It's a little more than a decade old. So it isn't that good, right? Comparatively, the internal combustion engine was invented in 1860. It's the bastion of human engineering that we're able to ride explosions down the highway the way we do today. And so with that, the electric vehicle just actually adds problems to the customer. And it's one of the first industries that doesn't solve a problem for the customer, but we're still trying to push people into it. It makes absolutely no sense. So for what Arcimoto is doing is, let's provide a vehicle that's less than $20,000 purchase price. You can charge it on a 110 outlet, and it costs you 25 to 75 cents a day to operate. And that is an actual electric vehicle for everyone.
It's like the book, The Secret, right? Success happens when you have the solution, you have this problem, or the problem and the solution, one and the other. Simpatico. It sounds like you're more passionate on the philanthropic side. It seems that you're just trying to give back because we only got one planet. And this is the conversations I really enjoy, because it just cuts into perspective. And, you guys are based in Eugene, Oregon, correct? And, kind of Pacific Northwest is kind of what I'd like to call a granola kind of area. The PNW really
super
kind of
crunchy.
Yeah, crunchy granola. And again, if you're just listening, Chris Dawson has a mane. He's got a great flow of hair, and he's got an Arcimoto behind him. So let's just go into it for somebody that's like, what the heck is an Arcimoto? You have many different options, like you said, sub 20,000, 19,000. You have options that can, bump it up, customization and all that, just like your standard automobile or your vehicle. But run through the range of what Arcimoto has to offer. Somebody's like, what is this? Maybe this is a solution for me to help save the planet and have mobility while having fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So right now, the options are the FUV, the fun utility vehicle, which you see behind me, and those that are just listening. It's a tandem seat, so it means one person seated behind the other. It is as it's seen here in the open air configuration. So think of a 3-wheel electric Jeep. It's technically considered an auto cycle, but it's open air. So me as a motorcycle guy, like, this is a great alternative if I don't want to have to deal with being on 2 wheels and still want all the mobility and the ability to squeeze through traffic and find easy to find parking, maneuver in and out. It's a perfect vehicle for that. We also have an option where you could get a full enclosure, much like a Jeep soft top, as well as Jeep style doors that can come on and off. And so with all of those options, as well as seats, you can do leather seats and working your way up into that. So I think if you're really trying to spend as much money as you wanted to,
Yeah.
you could get upwards of 28 for one of these vehicles as far as the retail side. And then the MUV, our modular utility vehicle, is more the commercial application. An individual could buy it if they wanted. It's a single seat, and it comes either just base flatbed, flatbed with rails, or a box. That base flatbed, we designed that much like a tractor on the farm has multiple implements. We try to make it as easy as possible to integrate. So we have some customers that are designing their own implement, their own back end to mount to that big plate we have in the back, or they're just like, oh yeah, the flatbed with rails is going to work. Like we've got a flatbed with rails sitting out on a vineyard. We got a few MUVs that people are using for food delivery. We converted one to being a coffee dispenser with taps right off the side of it. We've had a few requests for kegerators and other things like that. So very, it's a great blank slate for whatever you would want to implement. We had another company reach out for street sweepers, wanting to deploy instead of one big street sweeper costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. A few of these all disseminate for half the purchase price and do it in a quarter of the time, right? Because they're maneuverable and then get around. So it's clear. This is another thing with the EV industry is nobody wants to talk about the right tool for the right job. That is a fundamental truth in every industry except for EV. They're like, no, EV is the best tool for every job. That's the most asinine thing I've ever heard. But that's how we operate. And so for me, as you can tell kind of earlier when I was talking about internal combustion, there's a right place for that. There's a right place for EV. I keep both in my fleet today, right? I have internal combustion and I have electrified, and I'm looking for those perfect like hybrid options, which Arcimoto today also is playing around in some of that. We have our equipment inside military prototype vehicles today that they're currently testing and running through. I'd love to give more detail on that, but as you can imagine, they like to keep a tight lid on it. But we're actively developing technologies that aren't just in the micromobility space here, which is our flagship product. We have products upwards of 24,000 pounds with Arcimoto Gets in it operating as well in hybrid configurations. So this design, we built it such that you can rack and stack your way up to whatever flavor and application you want. So think of it as like electric Legos.
Yeah.
Right. I can take this small micro mobility solution and solve 90% of all your drives. Right. We looked at the data. 90% of all drives are one or two people, minimal cargo, 35 total miles for the day in 3-mile trips. So that's what we set this thing up for. It'll go 80. Well, the brochure says 75. I'll tell you right now, if you go all out on the flat, you'll get 81 miles an hour on the highway. You register it like a regular vehicle, but it's small and light enough that you can take it on the golf course. So we have a golf bag attachment that you can get on the website. And we have customers that load up their golf bags in their garage, drive it to the golf course. They don't get a golf cart. They just take their Arcimoto, do 18 holes, and then drive home. Right. And so we're really trying to solve problems for the customer, and you start with the customer experience and then you back away instead of how all EVs are going right now is you're like, oh, this is what we can do. And then we're going to force it. And then we assume that because Tesla was first, therefore that's the best that one can achieve. Mm-hmm. They're only the first mover. And I'm not saying they're doing a bad job. I think they're doing a great job. I have horrible bias. I was there in the early days in 2012 and then came on as a full-time employee in 2014. I was there to 2019. So all total 7 years inside that building, quite literally blood, sweat, and tears in a lot of those from the early days to where it is today. So I think it's a great product, but by no means should we accept it as the highest bar. Yeah. That's just the bar. We need to exceed that. And today, these vehicles are 3 times more efficient than your typical Tesla.
Because it seems like you just have, I mean, that's such a testimonial to, like I said, just this solution. Again, this is a test mule. And I love that you kind of alluded to, this is just the beginning. That's what I feel like, just listening to you talk more about Arcimoto, you're like, oh, this is cool. It's fun. You could rent them I'm seeing San Diego, the Star of India. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing, Hawaii. I'm seeing, as you say, golfing. I have homies that, I golf a lot, hence the Malbin hat. But I know at our course, they won't allow outside courses. But my homies in Arizona, oh, for sure,
Mhm.
this is great. And you're there in Eugene, Oregon. My buddies at Lab Golf, Lie Angle Balance, I could see them using one of these, but that's kind of the golf space. But as far as, I've heard this, it's a broken record. I love the solution, like you said. You have an ICE car, you have the EV one. For your short trips, you're just going around town, you're going to groceries, you're going maybe out to dinner, or go to the bar, have some libations. The EV is a perfect solution. But yeah, I went to Vegas. I was out at Nitro Cross this last weekend. I see the superchargers right there in Barstow. Great solution. But I'd rather just boom, fill up my tank once and I'm there in 3.5 hours. So I think this is really cool. What this vehicle, again, look it up right now. I'll wait. Arcimoto, anybody listening. This is something that is reminiscent of you would see in Europe, you'd see in Southeast Asia, but it's here in the States. What other markets are you kind of looking at like overall for Arcimoto? I mean, obviously this seems it's cool. Is it, because I saw you're on NASDAQ as well. You're being publicly traded, so that's obviously feeding into the whole climate of it all.
Yeah, so we're looking at all markets, of course. Now, the U.S. markets where we all live and breathe, and that's where we want to have the most impact. But really, the goal for Arcimoto is to drive humanity into sustainable transportation through the proliferation of the technology. But we're not going to push that onto the customer, right? It's like, here are all the problems that the product solves, and oh, and by the way, it's sustainable. We get this in our head that there's such thing as a sustainable company. There is no such thing as a sustainability company. You don't monetize that. It's a feature, not a function. That's how I like to say it, right? We think sustainability is a function. It's not. It's a feature. We still have to solve problems for the customer. When you solve problems for the customer, you'll get adoption. And
Yeah.
everyone has got this disconnect. It's like, why can't we adopt? Quite literally, I was at a Reuters conference, and the reporter asked me, "Is like, EV adoption is slowing. And what is it that you and Arcimoto are doing to re-educate customers to know that they need to buy these products?" And it kind of set me off a little bit. And I said, well, the fundamental flaw of that question is that the consumer's screwed up,
Hmm.
right? We're screwed up. The product sucks. If your product doesn't suck and it's priced right, it'll sell, right?
Yeah.
There, there, there's a business model that's worked quite literally for thousands of years. Provide a product that your customers can afford that actually solves problems for them. That business model has worked for 3,000 years, since the beginning of civilization. And we just throw that all out the window because electric vehicles are the future. They are indeed the future, but they've got a long development cycle. If you compare that to internal combustion in 1860, right? That initial 1860, though amazing for the time, absolutely garbage compared to what we do today.
Right.
Imagine what will happen in 120 years of electrification. And it won't take us that long to get a comparable level of development, because what we learned in the development of the internal combustion now can be applied to electrification. And then the other piece is, if we just hit the switch and switched over to electrification, think of all the jobs, the tooling, the manufacturing capability worldwide that just gets shut off so we can shift over to this new. Like, that doesn't make sense, right? That's
Yeah.
like inventing the internal combustion engine and flying to Mongolia and shooting all the horses, right? It's like, sorry guys, there's a better technology. You don't get to have it, but you don't get to have the old one either. Like, this Vikings burn the ships approach is not useful, not helpful, and not rational.
You're ticking all the boxes as far as the emotions of an EV adopter or late. Like, again, I don't own an EV vehicle. It's just what is my necessity? What is my solution? That's me personally. But I love how you're tapping into all of those questions. And this is why, what are some of the boards that you were excited about going and speaking to people on a board, on a panel, educating people, not on Arcimoto, but your school of thought? Because I think you're a real proponent of this, but you're not saying, imagine that shift of horses. So, hey, see this thing? I don't know why they're going to talk like this, but hey, see this? Oh, I got a solution for you. Like you said, put the horse down. No, it's not just going to be that quick on and off switch. What were some of the panels or the boards that you were excited about? Maybe glow up some of your peers that are doing it right, because that's rising tide lifts all ships. Because if you're just doing this, like you say, it's going to fall on deaf ears. It's like, Chris, cool story, bro. I get it. I'm out. Can you think of
Yeah,
anybody?
yeah. So right now, the first company that comes to mind, and again, bias alert. I was there running engineering for a time. I was an initial investor in it. I really believe in what they're doing. And this company, new NXU, previously known as Atlas Motor Vehicles. they're focusing in on charging. And as you mentioned before, like, oh, supercharger, great. It's still too much time. If we think about the customer experience at fill up or the transference of energy into the vehicle, right? I can take a big diesel truck, Ram 3500, F450, pull up 6 minutes, get some cinnamon bears, a Red Bull, be back on the road, topped off 30 gallons. I got 500 miles more range. That is what you have to compete with on the EV side. So even the best superchargers right now are garbage.
Yeah.
Right. And this is what we are figuring out at New is that if you do the math, right, and again, you start with the customer experience and then work backward and say, okay, and we were trying to develop a heavy duty full electric vehicle because no one's done that. So the equivalent of Ram 3500 F450 in the electric version with all the typical stats to be comparable. But then that big hanger, right, is like if I'm hauling a load with an electric truck, if they're not turning, it's not earning. So if I'm sitting at the pump, I'm getting hosed twice,
Yep.
right? And so how do you
got all the puns? You got all the puns. Great job, Chris. Keep it up.
So you look at that and say, okay, like what's acceptable? 6 to 10 minutes, depending on the pump speed, and say, okay, let's grab that conservative end because this is a hard problem, and say 10 minutes. Okay, so from plug in to plug out, we need 10 minutes. Well, then it's just math. If I got a 200 kilowatt battery, in order to do that in 10 minutes, I need 1.5 megawatts, right? Simple straight line math. Okay, now you decide that is possible. Now make it so, right? And back your way into it. And this is what New is doing. And so I think that all of the kilowatt charging that is out there today will get ripped up in the next 10 years because it's not good enough. If you look at full adoption, right now, there's not enough electric vehicles on the road to fully utilize all of that charging. If we were to just even tick that up by 20%, I already have an issue when I try to use a public charger with one of my electric vehicles. Yeah, there's only 3-4 slots. Half of them aren't working half the time. The payment systems aren't working. Like it's clunky. The customer experience sucks. And then I'm waiting in line to charge. And then it's not like it's every 5 minutes a new car. It's every 45 at best to an hour that we're then moving forward. And so what that means is if we keep that at kilowatt, it's taking too long to cycle through customers. If you take that to megawatt, now we're pushing customers out 5 to 15 minutes. Now that line isn't nearly that big of an issue. I've waited at a line at a gas station before. It moves fairly quick, right, as you go through. Now we're talking about an acceptable customer experience. And there's a little bit of chicken and an egg, right? It's like, okay, megawatt charging, great, because all the naysayers right now are saying, okay, he's talking megawatt charging, but no vehicles can take megawatt charging. 100% correct, right? So we've got to create both. We need to create systems that, one, don't require megawatt charging, like an FUV, we can charge it on a 110 outlet. So kilowatts actually work for that. So here's a product that actually fits well with the current infrastructure, right, ready to go now. And then megawatt charging for interstate travel, commercial, but I think hybrid is really the future there when we're starting to talk commercial, because the crux of the problem is within energy density. If you take let's say a gallon of milk, think a gallon of milk, now fill that full of fuel. That's about 33 kilowatts of energy in that 1 gallon, right? To make that same 33 kilowatts, this is only a 20 kilowatt battery that's in this, right? So less than a gallon of fuel's worth of energy is sitting inside that. And it runs the entire span, right? So I know some of you are listening, but it's about 4.5 feet from the rear to the front, and that's only 20 kilowatts, and it's about 450 pounds. A gallon of fuel is 6 pounds, a little between 6 and 7 pounds, I think 6.8. So there's two things you're fighting there is I have to take up a lot more space to hold a ridiculously less amount of energy and a massive amount of more weight, like orders of magnitude, multiple orders of magnitude in weight to hold that same amount of energy. So these are some of the things that we're fighting in EV. Now, it's a function of us being so early. Like we'll continue to develop. There's tons of technologies out there. There's folks working on nano level battery solutions, nano fuel systems. Those are really interesting. That would allow you to actually charge a fuel offline, come in, drain, transfer the fuel, your dead fuel back into a system, live fuel back in, and now you have an energy transference that's comparable to an internal combustion engine, but it's electric.
Yeah.
Right? It's just those things are 5, 10, 15 years out, which is actually incredibly fast.
They got to start somewhere, right? I mean, here we are talking about it. So it's obviously, if you can think about it, if you can dream it, somebody's doing it, somebody's executing or getting to that step, which, they're risking a lot there, because EV and electric is scary, but that was fuel back in the day. If it, petrol, whatever you want to call it. There's something you said early on about this battery technology and weight, and you're saying, talking about heavy duty, because nobody's really executed that. So you don't think the Lightning or the GM product or anything like that is a kind of a solution? You're just saying, no, it's not the right solution for that
Not
space.
for commercial. And that being said, I have a Ford Lightning and it's brilliant.
Oh,
I
perfect.
love
All
that.
right, hey, that's good.
I love that rig.
Jim just gave me thumbs up. Farley just says, yeah, thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So no, the Lightning is great. I actually bought it for the utility of it. Having been at Atlas early days, I had definitely my opinions of what an electric truck should be, and the Lightning was not it. But it supported vehicle to home, and I wanted to have backup power at the house to support that. And they're charging $1,000 per kilowatt for backup energy as part of the solar system. I'm like, you guys are smoking it. Like, if I'm going to spend $100,000 on backup batteries, it's going to have wheels on it, right? And so Ford Lightning, 131 kilowatt battery, sports vehicle to home. I don't have to swap anything. I can just run it right through its bi-directional charger and supports the house. Then I got in it and I started driving it. And I'm like, holy smokes, like I should have given this thing a fair thought. I never even test drove it. I just passed judgment, right? Decide that's not the electric vehicle I would design, therefore it sucks, right? That was what I thought. I drove it. It's brilliant, super smooth. It's smoother than my BMW. The hands-free function is seamless. It's great, super smooth. I can go from Portland down to Eugene down I-5 and not even touch the steering wheel the whole way, and it just handles it. So brilliant. But where it falls down is on the commercial application and the long-term towing, right? And it's not so much that it falls down, is that the infrastructure isn't there to support it. It's not like it has different physics that we have to overcome versus internal combustion. But I can stop every 100 miles to top off my truck that's burning through the fuel like crazy. I can't really do that, or I've got to spend hours, right? And so it's a full system breakdown for electrification on the commercial side. Whereas I think for the interim, for the next 10 years, hybrid for sure is the solution. One, we already have the manufacturing capability to producing those internal combustion engines globally. I think diesel is the way to go on level of efficiency. If we look at environmental impacts, DPF filters, urea treatments, the technology has advanced to such a point that diesel is actually better. Like I run a 535D for my interstate road trip vehicle.
Yeah.
I get 600 miles to a tank. It's super efficient. It sips on the fuel. And if I want to get after it and have fun with it, it's still super quick, right? And so that's another piece where I think people are dropping the ball is we're going. So like what Dodge is doing, I think is great. Electric powertrain, gas range extender. Should have been diesel. But diesel, I think, is getting a bad rap, especially here in the United States. So they say like, we're going to sell more on gas than we are on diesel. The performance specs that you'll get out of a diesel, and I'm not talking 0 to 60. For some reason, like when we were thinking about vehicles, it's 0 to 60. I mean, the latest thing from Tesla, there's like sub 1 second, 0 to 60. That is awesome, and I absolutely want to experience that. But that wears off in about 6 days, right? On the 7th day, you rest, and you realize, hang on, I got to drive this to go get groceries and other things, and I'm not trying to do that on a sub 1 second. And this is where something that's 3 times more efficient than a typical Tesla steps in and says, okay, this is easy. It's not crazy powerful where I actually can get myself in trouble, but quick enough that you can get through traffic, small enough that you can get through traffic, easy to find parking. You park it where you park motorcycles. And it's literally a plug and play solution. So now someone in an apartment, worst case, if I don't have a charger, I live in an apartment, I can string a cord out the window and charge my rig. Right. So even if I'm on the 3rd or 4th floor, I get a couple 100-foot cable and just run it out there, and I can charge this thing. Or I use a public charger and it charges super quick because it's a 20 kilowatt battery.
I mean, you're like the electric Jesus here, and Clark Griswold, because you're going 4 stories down with extension
Yeah,
cords to
yeah,
charge Arcimoto. But I mean, I love tapping into this, and that's exactly this kind of train we are going down. We're talking about Arcimoto, but like I said, this is like this test mule that is breeding this technology. So I kind of want to go back to Arcimoto. I love where this is going, and we've talked about so many different vehicles and companies, and that's what I really like about this space, and going to Electrify Expo and seeing kind of this unification of the EV space and mobility and accessibility. That's what it's really about. But going back to the Arcimoto, like I said, it feels like something I've seen in Europe. I have a buddy, Carta Healy. He's all about, he's American dude. He's actually from Oregon, the Healy family. I don't know if you know them, but he's been about alternative transportation for years. I met him when I worked on Gumball 3000. He's an amazing friend of Maximilian Cooper, but he had something very similar to what I would consider comparable to the MUV, which it was like a BMW and it kind of shifted like that. Do you know what I'm talking about? Has a little hood on it. And that's what I'm seeing with this MUV. This is applicable in Los Angeles. This is an absolutely Uber Eats, DoorDash, whatever you want to call it, Postmates. This is a vehicle that I could absolutely see ripping around. I'm sure you do have those scenarios, right?
Yeah, and another aspect that we haven't talked about yet, we have full autonomous versions of these.
Oh boy,
And
here we
and
go.
it's not like
In a
science
good way.
project. We're trying to figure it out. Everybody's going back to the drawing board because no one's got it nailed down. Now, we are actively delivering items today in autonomous vehicles with various partners. One is Coca-Cola Bakery in the Bay Area. We're partnered with Faction. They handle all the autonomous software, hardware pieces, and they integrate. We've been working with them for a few years, and so we work hand in hand to solve a lot of these solutions. In here in the next couple of weeks, we'll actually announce some real big names that you've definitely heard about
Cool.
in the autonomous delivery, like initial pilots, right?
Okay.
And so this, like I said, everyone's going back to the drawing board. It's still this science project. We've got it figured out, and we're actually solving problems for customers with it. And now look at, like, I'm not going to call anybody out, but if you look at the price points of all those other autonomous solutions, we're into that with an order of magnitude less, right? And it's because what we're doing is everything that you need, nothing that you don't, right? That's probably the cleanest way to describe Arcimoto. And that works really well for commercial applications. And right now, as this solution is set up, it's more of a fair weather vehicle, right? We've produced over 1,000 of these vehicles. They've driven 1.2 million miles. They're proven. We know that this works. Now, thinking about the customer experience and say, okay, what does the customer really want? They want to solve more than 90% of their drives with the product. This isn't that, right?
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
got tons of people that buy them here because there's some local support in Eugene. This is not a great vehicle for Eugene, Oregon, right?
That's I appreciate your honesty. That's good.
Right? It's not, but it was a great start, and we figured it out. This is a hard problem. We know it's a hard problem, right? Because Elon's been trying to do it for over a decade. He's been trying to get to a product that regular people can't afford, and he still hasn't done it, right? And I always say it's not because he doesn't necessarily know how. It's because where he started. He started high and is trying to back into it. And there's a piece of advice that I got to overhear is where one guy was saying, he's like, "Oh, I want to build $1 million houses, but I'm building these $300,000 houses. I'm trying to work my way up to it." And this coach's response to him was, "It's like if you want to build $1 million houses, stop building $300,000 houses, right?" And so he started with this aspirational vehicle, which I think was obviously successful from a business perspective. But if we go way back in time, right, hop in the Wayback Machine and say, what were we actually trying to do early days Tesla? We're trying to drive adoption of electric vehicles. The only way you do that is you put them in every single driveway. The only way you get it in every single driveway, you get the price point down where regular people can afford them. And so backing into it clearly hasn't worked. Like, will it get there eventually? Yeah, I think so. So instead of trying to back into it, how about we just start there, muddle through it, bang our head, get some scars, get some more gray hair, figure it out. That's this. Now, next generation FUV that we should see roll in the next couple of years, like in driveways in the next couple of years, will solve more than 90% of those drives, right? We'll target 4 seats, 2 doors, 3 wheels, still an auto cycle, still sub 20,000, still charging a 110 outlet. And then you'll start seeing is those will start popping up in everybody's driveway because they'll make way too much sense. Cost me
Yeah.
25 to 75 cents a day to operate it.
So many great staggering stats here, and I'm looking at the culture of it too. The Arcanauts ride, just these early adopters of the Arcimoto, or just right now, just grabbing it. Again, I was just in Vegas, and I saw that you were going to be on the podcast. Literally, one drive past me. I was in a 1960s convertible Buick that's just go 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 go,
Yeah.
and this guy just zips past me on the strip, and I was like, oh, that looks like fun. So I guess another question would be, how does one experience this? Get hands-on. I mean, are you displaying at Expo? I'm seeing in certain markets you can go rent one, which would obviously be, San Diego, San Francisco, Marina del Rey in California, and Florida. You're all over. But how else would you recommend somebody experiencing Arcimoto firsthand and maybe being a consumer if this is a solution for their lifestyle?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we have a strong showing down in Florida. We have strong showing down in Southern California, right? The fair weather areas that are really ideal. And those are areas we're really starting to target on. We recently got ours written into legislation on the auto cycle side in Texas. It's another one I'm actually heading down to South by Southwest.
Awesome.
And we'll be presenting actually in a military booth down there because, like I said, we've been working with them. And they nearly drugged some of the prototypes that we have guts in that are operating down to the show. They didn't quite make it. But we'll have our rapid responder, which is our military security, full lights, rack solution for patrol and other things. We'll have that vehicle down there. And I will personally be down there with that vehicle. So anybody at South by West want to get me cornered to ask me whatever questions, that's a good place to do it because I'll be standing still. I'm usually a moving target. So right now we're actually looking to scale out, and we're going to leverage dealers. So originally we're doing a direct to consumer approach, and this was before my time. I took over Arcimoto in April last year, trying to get it back on track. They've done an incredible job making it through COVID. Nearly killed them, as it did with most companies. But now, so the company's been around a while. Started in 2007, went public in 2017, raised a boatload of money. COVID hit and just smacked everybody.
Yeah.
The team still figured out how to make it through and made like a cockroach and survived through that, where all the other three wheelers are falling down on their face.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not a reflection on them. Right. It was just a tough market to try to go through. The team here is super resilient and has been able to keep taking it on the chin and just keep on trucking. I mean, they're the beast of burden that's invigorated by the weight of the yoke, right? They just like pile it on and they get stronger, pile it on and they get stronger, and they've been pushing through. So now we're finally at that stage where we're starting to develop dealer relationships. And so we'll start announcing those dealers, and that's going to be the best way for people to come in and experience. Because here's the other thing is when you're doing direct to consumer, I'm a little bit old school, right? I like to crank on a wrench myself.
Yep.
I'm not buying anything that I don't put my butt in the seat, right? And when we ask people to go online and buy a vehicle, like I'll go on and buy a set of earbuds online, but I'm not buying a vehicle.
No,
Right?
it's a huge exposure. That's a massive exposure. And all the things you're telling me are fantastic. And I might believe you, like I said, this electric Jesus, but you know what? Like I gotta feel, I gotta touch it, I gotta experience. And especially in a purchase like this, you say it, yeah, sub 20, 19.9, 19.5, but it's still an investment. And again, how does it work into my lifestyle?
Yeah, that's still a significant amount of money, right?
Yeah.
It solves mobility, and your overall operational costs drop to such a level that, depending on your level of driving, ROI is pretty quick comparatively to internal combustion. And I have yet to see gas prices actually retract by a decent amount. And they seem to just ratchet up, come back a little, ratchet more, right? And granted, the energy out of the wall isn't decreasing either, but it's increasing at a significantly slower rate. And this is using a lot. Already Tesla being more efficient than internal combustion, we already know that. And then having a vehicle that then is 3 times more efficient than that. Because when we think sustainability, we only think energy. What we're not thinking is all the materials that go into it. Mm-hmm. Right? With the amount of materials that go into a Model 3, depending on how you dial the thing up, I can make 4 to 6 of these things out of the same amount of material. So it's not just the energy usage and operation, but it's the energy required to actually build the thing. if we're intellectually honest about the carbon footprint that an electric vehicle has, if we look at a typical Tesla, and not calling it it's any of them, it could be Lucid, it could be Rivian, it doesn't matter, right? Just everybody knows Tesla for context.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at 40 to 60 barrels of oil that you're using just to get that thing on the road. So even if you're charging off of solar power, the entire life of that, you're looking at a 3 to 5 year time frame before you dig out of the initial carbon hole that the internal combustion didn't have to go through for the development of the battery. And then we look at post-process recycling is another massive carbon footprint piece. So there's still a lot, there's this intellectually honest conversation that no one really wants to have around EV, but there's a lot of development that has to happen. There's a lot of chicken and egg, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be, by no means am I beating up on that, that industry. I think like JB Straubel at Redwood Materials, right? I had the benefit of working for him in the battery factory initially when I came on at Tesla, right? Solid guy, super bright. He's now working on recycling batteries at Redwood Materials.
Perfect.
Right. And so we're bridging these out. So one, like the intellectually honest conversation, let's understand how much of a carbon footprint we're actually putting and whether or not we should use carbon as a way to measure it. It's like 0.4% of the atmosphere, right? It's just it's an indicator, right? But let's have some patience in that we need to develop this technology, but let's not just run in to say, oh, this is the future, so let's go whole hog and actually do more damage than we're currently doing because we're trying to rush into something and then create an environment by which that the customer experience is absolutely horrible, which means adoption is going to be horrible, and we're going to have to stick everybody into the product instead of carrot them.
I'm just looking at all the different models, and yeah, I mean, I love just where you're going, man. I'm just thinking of different homies that this could work out with, like my buddy Keith Sarlos and Los Olivos. He owns a winery. You talked about winery. You talk about, just the simple things. I live in Inland Empire in California. Drive my kid to school, go to the golf course, do this. But yeah, I'll jump in my truck and go do that. My oldest son's going to go to school in Arizona. There's a solution right there. Just all of the different accessibility issues, and I think it's really great. But I'm really fascinated by how much responsibility you have, right? Like with great power comes great responsibility. I feel like this is I'm excited to see what you're going to announce this year. By the end of this year, it seems that you guys are, I'll just call it what it is. You're very passionate, outspoken, but you seem knowledgeable because you have been in it for a long time. I didn't even say you were CEO, but I assume anybody that clicked on this CEO, Arcimoto, Chris Dawson. What else is exciting for you in the Arcimoto? You talk about military, you talk about going to South by Southwest. I think that's a good demographic. Everybody thinks it's just a music festival. It's a technology fest is what it is. And then, oh, by the way, they're doing music. So what else are you excited about, man? And who do you want to hear this podcast? Like, that's what I always ask my guests. Like, who's your ideal either consumer or maybe just skeptic? I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
I think everyone, right, to understand that not all of us in the EV space are so ridiculously dogmatic that we're myopic to all of the negatives and we're just going to pretend like those don't exist. From the outside looking in, that generally seems to be the case. So in some people refer to me as the anti-EV guy, right? Because it's like EVs suck for a lot of applications, and they're like, no, really, this tastes great. It's like supplements online, like this tastes wonderful, and it's like this is dog food. Like no, like so. Not all of us are that way. At Arcimoto, we're trying to actually solve problems for the customer. It's not incumbent upon the customer to make the right sustainable solutions, right? They're trying to put food on the table and carve out a little section of their life. I've been fortunate enough to have the opportunities to be able to be where I'm at and have checked off enough of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs that I can start making decisions based on higher order of impact, humanity, and those things. Most people have not been that fortunate. So it's incumbent upon us who have been fortunate and that are developing that technology to develop the sustainable technologies. But beating customers over the head to say, hey, you need to make more sustainable solutions. No. Hey, a-hole, you need to provide more sustainable solutions for the customer, right? It's incumbent upon us who are running businesses to provide those options and then ensure that those options are better than what the customer is using. Therefore, adoption will happen.
Yeah.
It's really that simple, and we've lost the plot. So not all of us are lost, right? And where internal combustion makes sense in your life, then that's what you should do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
My opinion, anybody's opinion, Elon, whoever, on that level of adoption makes zero sense on your life. You're the master of your universe. If at
Mm-hmm.
the point it makes sense, then pull the trigger. If it doesn't make sense, don't pull the trigger. I don't want you going hungry, so we all feel better about what you're doing for the environment. Like, take care of you and yours, and we'll develop the technology to actually introduce that into your life and make your life easier. Unencumber the customer.
It's great, man. I think we really kind of cut into what Arcimoto is about, what you're trying to provide for, you know, the acronym is great. Like I said, FUV, but it seems like just more of an opportunity for success and teaming up. Like I said, I asked you what companies you admire and being on these boards. Anything else you want to add, man? I mean, check out Arcimoto on IG. I think I'd love to see, because you can go to these spaces. Like I looked up, you can rent them in San Diego or San Francisco. I think you need some sort of flatbed truck that drops one off for like a weekly rental or something like that. Like, I'm just thinking, like I said, I'm not anywhere near Marina Del, or I'm an hour. I'm going to drive there later, go pick up my buddy at LAX, but drop it off, enjoy one for the week. I think that'd be a good solution too. I'm thinking I'd really like to experience it for a week
Yeah.
here in
So
Southern California.
I'll give you some insight into what's coming. You don't need the flatbed, right? And so this food delivery, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
an obvious that's a big market. The most expensive piece is the head. We're able to delete the head involved in that process, and so that drastically reduces it. Now I want you to imagine this: you land at McCarran Airport, right? You're heading to Caesar's Palace. You pull up whatever rideshare app, whatever it is. There's an Arcimoto option. Let's say you hit that,
Got
the
it.
Arcimoto shows up on its own, right? You get in it, you drive it, right? Because I don't want to deal with the liability of autonomously driving when I got something soft and squishy in the driver's seat, right?
Yep.
When 90, I'm making this stat up, but it's got to be 95+% of people who use an Uber or a Lyft would have rather been driven themselves. I know I'm kind of a driver. I always wish I was driving, but almost every time I wish I was just driving that vehicle anyway.
Right.
But I need someone to get that vehicle to me, and I need someone to take that vehicle away. What if that vehicle just showed up? You drove it to Caesar's Palace. You say, "Okay, thanks, buddy. I'm done," and then it goes away. I've now turned a $30 to $60 Uber. Let's be honest, it's probably 60 to 80 now in
Right.
Vegas. To do that trip, I've turned that into $153. Right? Because
Lime scooter. It's a lime that shows up, right? It's or
and
whatever,
puts itself
whatever.
away and doesn't leave itself laying on the sidewalk.
Yeah, bird.
Right.
I mean,
And
right? Everybody
so
hated birds.
right. And so now imagine like that's just one test case, right? So you keep the test cases small where you control the environment, like an airport or something like that. But if we go full right and we start ratcheting this over the next few years, now you're at home. Maybe you don't have a vehicle, but you don't really need one because there's such a reliable network to the point. It's like I just order what I need, drive it. Your Lime scooter just shows up, right? Your Arcimoto FUV just shows up. You take it to the dentist, you send it off. It costs you maybe $1, right? And as far as the operation, right? If I'm running this thing all day long, and let's say I've got to stop midday for 2 charges, and I run it all total operation, of that's going to be less than $5 a day from a business perspective, and
Yeah.
people are only paying like $1 a ride, right? And so that pays for itself real fast. And so this is where we'll see that shift. And I think, I mean, obviously, I don't know where everybody's at. I know what they project. So based on what other companies are projecting where they're at, we're miles ahead of them on the application and the proliferation of that technology because we're actually applying it today and running test cases in multiple areas throughout the US through autonomous as well as commercial applications for last mile delivery.
It's such a amalgamation there of Zipcar meets Lime meets Uber meets autonomous, and autonomous was scary. I lived in Arizona for my wife and kids and I for 15 years, and there was unfortunate incidents, but that was user error. That was somebody jumping in front of an autonomous car, and that person would, if there was another, as you say, a squishy body in the seat, that unfortunately would have happened regardless. That woman jumped in front of a car, the one that I saw, the Wii U or whatever it was, and it's unfortunate, but the technology is getting better, and that's what's important. And it seems that you are just this petri dish of emotion, application, solution, partnership. Seems like you're going down the right path, man. Congratulations on like you said, just taking over not even a year. And I'm sure you've curated kind of a team that is on the same wavelength of not just let's make a fun car. Let's figure
Yeah,
something out.
I mean, making stuff fun. Everybody wants to do something fun, right?
Of course.
I'm here. I know this to my very big. I'm here to shift humanity in the direction that I can. I don't expect to be the one to do it. I just want to move it an inch, right? And the way I describe it's the Spartan inch of innovation, right? You think of the shield wall: take the inch, hold the inch; take the inch, hold the inch. Like throw the ego out. Like you don't need to cross the finish line. Just get an inch. The next guy will get the next inch, right? If you get 2 inches, you're lucky. And just keep marching that forward. And if you absolve the ego from that decision, is like all I need to do is push this a little bit further forward. And let's look at it on a larger project sense. Like we're trying to do, quote unquote, impossible things. Like forget about this thing at the end. Just decide it's possible. Like that's half the battle. Now make it so, right? And so let's say I've got this impossible task in a year. What needs to be true 6 months from now? What needs to be true a month from now? What needs to be true next week? What needs to be true today to solve the week, to solve the month, to solve the 6, to solve the impossible thing? Concentrate on the inch. Own your inch. Don't worry about anybody else's inch. Own yours. And then you build the whole team out that way and you keep marching. And you hold that level of accountability. I'm not everybody's cup of tea as far as wanting to work with me. But I do require everyone to own their inch. And when they step out of their inch, I definitely slap them back into their inch, right? And we keep marching that forward. And that's the way to do it, is just keep taking these incremental steps. Everybody wants to be the Tesla of this, the Tesla of that. Well, the internal joke at Tesla is I went and spent 2 years getting an MBA so I could figure out why Tesla shouldn't be able to operate, right? It's the right guy at the right time with the right amount of money, with the right financial backers like Goldman Sachs, right? Like all of the stars aligned for that to happen. Anybody trying to recreate it, I think, is doomed to failure. We see that at Rivian and Lucid today, right? Those are all the same people that I worked with in the early days at Tesla. And it's at no fault of their own. They know one way to build an electric vehicle company, and it's how Tesla did it. Only Tesla will do that. There won't be another Tesla. The rest of us have to build products that customers can afford that actually solve their problems. And there's going to be, yes, there's unicorns here and there. They're going to shoot off. But I don't think I'm special. Most people aren't special. Like we're just going to have to slug it out just like everybody else and march it forward, take every single inch that we can get and hold it, and then solve problems for customers. And then that will drive adoption.
Move the inch. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about we. And right. I like that stance, man. And yeah, it seems like you said, not everybody loves me. Might be a polarizing figure, but that's how you get electricity, man. No pun intended. So I appreciate it, man. And again, check out Arcimoto, CEO of Arcimoto, Chris Dawson. Thank you for your time, man. I really appreciate it. It's been a fun conversation where I thought we were just going to talk about, listen to having orange mocha frappuccinos, listening to Jitterbug, riding around in San Diego, and catching an early flight home. I'm joking. Sorry, bad movie quote. But we ended up learning a lot more, not just about Arcimoto, but the state of what you're trying to accomplish. So thank you so much, man.
Yeah, I have a pleasure. It's a great conversation. Look forward to the next one.
Yeah, man. Thanks for listening to the Electrify podcast, brought to you by the creators of Electrify Expo. Be sure to catch full video episodes on YouTube at Electrify TV and follow along on social media for daily clips and more.